Hi friends, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to another week of Wednesday Formation Fun. We're continuing our series on the fruits of the Spirit. And this week we're going to skip around a little bit and we're going to move to peace. Felt like a great week to talk about peace. Peace in a world where things may feel out of control and there's so much happening, and this importance of being reminded of the incredible peace that God gives us. I think about each week in worship where we share that peace and we're reminded to say, "The peace of the Lord be with you," and also with you is the response, and then encouraged to share that peace throughout the week. And while we may not have been able to physically touch one another and shake a hand or give a hug or however we share that peace right now, that doesn't change the fact that we can still share that peace. We can speak of that peace and remind people that in trusting God, God's peace helps us to not be afraid or worried about things, which is, I think, hard sometimes, isn't it? So today we are going to focus on this verse that comes from Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Tuck that away. Also today, we are going to think about what fruit we might associate with peace. We're going to read a story about some water. And so today, our fruit is going to be watermelon. You'll notice in this link down below from our friends at the Littles and Me, ways to explore this idea of peace and the story that we'll read today, with suggestions of comparing peaceful and serene music to loud and noisy music, to making boats that you can play with, and also having some watermelon pops, which can be frozen for these nice hot summer days. Let's read this story. Today we're going to use the Jesus Storybook Bible. It's one of my favorites. I love the illustrations in it. And we're going to read the story that comes from Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 41. But in here, it's called The Captain of the Storm. The sun was going down. The air was warm and still. "Let's go across the lake," Jesus said to his friends. Jesus had been helping people all day, and now he was tired. So they left the crowds at the shore and set out in a small fishing boat. Jesus climbed into the boat to take a nap. As soon as Jesus' head touched the pillow, he fell asleep. It was a beautiful evening. A gentle breeze rustled the sails. The friends were chatting happily as they headed out into the middle of the lake. Everything was perfect, just right for a nice, quiet sail. They were only about halfway across when, out of nowhere, whirling winds swept across the lake, fierce and strong like a hurricane. A blinding flash of lightning lit up the sky. Thunder roared right overhead. The storm blew the water into towering waves that hurled the little boat up, 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 and then sent it hurtling, crashing back down, down, down. The fishing boat was blown and buffeted and tossed and turned back and forth, and up and down and left and right and all around. And in the middle of the storm, Jesus was sleeping. Now, Jesus' friends had been fishermen all their lives, but in all their years of fishing on this lake, they had never once seen a storm like this one. No matter how hard they struggled with their ropes and sails, they couldn't control their boat. This storm was too big for them. But the storm wasn't too big for Jesus. "Help!" they screamed. "Wake up, quick, Jesus!" Jesus opened his eyes. "Rescue us," "Save us," they shrieked. "Don't you care?" Of course Jesus cared. And this was the very reason he had come, to rescue them and to save them. Jesus stood up and spoke to the storm. "Hush," he said. That's all. And the strangest thing happened. The wind and the waves recognized Jesus' voice. They heard it before, of course. It was the same voice that made them in the very beginning. They listened to Jesus and they did what he said. Immediately the wind stopped, the water calmed down, it glittered innocently in the moonlight and lapped quietly against the side of the boat as if nothing had happened. The little boat bobbed gently up and down. There was a deep stillness and a great quiet all around. Then Jesus turned to his wind-torn friends. "Why were you scared?" he asked. "Did you forget who I am? Did you believe your fears instead of me?" Jesus' friends were quiet as the wind and the waves, and in their hearts came a different kind of storm. "What kind of man is this?" they asked themselves anxiously. "Even the winds and the waves obey him," they said, because they didn't understand. They didn't realize yet that Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus' friends had been so afraid they'd only been able to see the big waves. They had forgotten that if Jesus was with them, then they had nothing to be afraid of. No matter how small their boat or how big their storm. How often do we get trapped with this believing the storm and our fears instead of trusting and relying on God? Has that happened to you? Yeah, it's happened to me too. Fear can take over sometimes, can't it? That's why I really love today's verse from Philippians, to be reminded to not be anxious about anything, which I know is hard, right? But in our trusting in God, God gives us peace. And so this week, our fruit in action is when you are feeling worried or afraid about anything, take time to pause, to pray, and give thanks to God for that peace. Friends, I look forward to seeing you again next week. The peace of the Lord be with you always.